Look at all that money. Look at all that money. Yeah, the money that they've spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Well, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for hemp.
Well, it must be time for hemp. Oh, what a good hit. Mercy. I don't know. You always seem to catch me in the middle of a puff. And while I'm hitting this, it would be nice if you could also hit the subscribe button and the like button below and let us know that you appreciate our work and share us with your friends. That's how we get found around on the internet. Today, we are breaking off into a whole new direction where we can find calm and peace and a little pixie dust that make our life a little more complete. And remember, we are focused on trying to end cannabis prohibition and bring hemp back into the farm industry where it becomes a very valuable cash crop to be utilized for all kinds of great products. And that is the significance of this program and why it's so important that you let everybody know how important it is to take time for hemp. On the program today, we are going to be calming ourselves down, as I said, with some pixie dust. But before we get started, I want to remind you that anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, we want you to hit your pipes, your vaporizers, your bongs, and your joints. And take time for hemp. With that said, let me bring on one of my joint hosts, Al Bird. And Al, don't forget to let people know about that great book you've got available and how they can find it.
Yes, thank you, Casper. And we do have a great host today, our guest today. I haven't spoken with her before, but I've seen her resume. It's quite impressive, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. The book, it's for country and cannabis. It's been out about a year and a half. It's doing really, really well. There's all sorts of interest in it, and it's a book that if you have any interest at all in the history of medical cannabis, especially, you should have this in your library. I wrote it for a couple of reasons. One, it's a history book. It explains to people that don't know, and that's most of you, how this happened. How did we go from no medical cannabis to having it now in 40 states, all of our territories in the United States, plus DC, and at least 27 other countries have this in their pharmacopoeia at a minimum. There's probably more, I lost count. So we've got all that information. Well, how did it happen? How did that all turn out? Well, I wrote about it, and I told you how it happened. And then I noticed in the history people that were significantly important to this happening. People you've never heard of, maybe, unless you've been in the business like we have for a long time. But they were very significant people, men and women, doctors, nurses, researchers, not so much politicians and no cops that helped us get where we are today. So it's a history book, and then the other part of it is I've crammed. It's 360 pages long, so it's a real book, and it's crammed full of medical information about the cannabis plant, some of which we're going to talk about today. But it probably does exceed your knowledge of cannabis and its variety of uses, not just physical, but emotional, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a book. You ought to have it in your library. I hope you do. And we'll discuss little bits of it here and there because it's pertinent to our discussions at Time for Hemp. So, and it mentions hemp, by the way. It's just not a medical cannabis book. I put the hemp in there. And so in order to get to our guest, we must get to our next joint host. And his name is Al, not Al, but Al Graham. And he's up there somewhere in Ontario. Are you out there, Al?
I am here, Al. Yes, I'm in Ontario, Canada. I'm east of the big city of Toronto. Our guest today is actually from Toronto. So we'll be finding out more of what's going on in the place they call the Big Smoke. But as far as myself, you can catch the stuff that I'm involved with at paceradio.net, and that is cannabis as well as psychedelic programming. We run new programming every day of the week, and you can catch us as I said, paceradio.net.
The Big Smoke?
Repeat that.
The Big Smoke, yes.
I've never heard that. Could you explain that to me, please?
Big Toke. I should have said Big Toke because, like, at one time, like Toronto, a lot of people were heading to Toronto for cannabis-wise. A lot of advocates, a lot of people from other places, other countries and stuff. We had in the city alone, I know in 2012, I wrote a review of 10 vapor lounges. And at that time, cannabis was completely illegal. Right? And people would go there, all kinds of events, which our guests will be able to talk about today. That happened there in the cannabis community for years, big years. 50, or quite 50, like 30,000 people to a global marijuana march. We were always, really happy with that attendance. Mind you, things have changed over the years, and I'm sure that might come up part of our discussion today. Who knows? But yeah, that's we call it the Big Smoke, Big Dope.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We want to thank you for all your hard work up in Canada as well, Al. I mean, you have been, along with a handful of other activists, spearheading the changes there in that country. So
yeah, it takes a lot of people, a lot of time over a lot of years. And what I always say, it's like the waves on the shoreline. Water comes in, that brings in new advocates, and then over time, the next wave, that's a new wave of advocates, and then the next wave is another wave of advocates, and our voices just keep getting bigger and bigger, and more people are involved in it, and the more people have spoken out, and it's makes things much better for everybody. Right.
So we got a groovy guest that I know everybody needs to calm down and relax and allow us to enjoy some of the beautiful pixie dust that's going to come our way.
Right. Well, why don't I bring her into the broadcast? I'll introduce her. Okay. As I mentioned, today's guest is from Toronto-based advocate. She's an entrepreneur. Plus, from my experience with knowing her, she has a deep roots in the cannabis community. Her passion for the plant, which we'll talk about today, has fueled a diverse career from co-founding cannabis-based companies to developing, creating cannabis educational programs at an Ontario college, which I'm sure Al probably looks forward to talking to her about that because he's done that with Patients Have Time. So at this moment, we'd like to welcome and happy to say Jennifer Pixie is taking time for hemp. G'day, Jennifer. How you doing?
Hey guys. Hi, Al. Hi, Al. And hi, Casper. I'm doing great, and I'm very glad to be here with you all today.
There we go. I just got to get you in position, move you around on the screens here. So, Jennifer, thanks for joining us for today's broadcast. It's always nice to be able to talk to other Canadian advocates and let people around the world through Time for Hemp to learn about their experiences, and maybe your experiences can get others to do something likewise. Right.
Well, I started.
Oh, okay. I thought you were muted there, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. I started in my advocacy sort of career with, as Casper was alluding to, CALM, which was Cannabis As Living Medicine, which was one of Canada's first medical dispensaries. They opened in 1996, which was well before any of the medical programs officially started for federal patients. But there was already a deep need for medical cannabis access and safer access to cannabis. Because of course, at the time, it was literally back alley deals for people who were dying of AIDS and cancer. And so having a storefront location where people could come with dignity was a huge step. And when I first discovered my needs for medical cannabis, it was through my doctor who knew about Calm and said to me, and this was in 2005, which was after the federal legalization program started for medical patients. But my doctor said, that program isn't really for you. But what is for you is this type of access in this safe and holistic type of situation. And I found an instant sense of community when I joined Calm, and I wanted to start volunteering there. I wanted to get involved. I wanted to do more because I knew how much cannabis was helping me. And the idea that there were so many people who didn't have access was definitely something I wanted to change.
Yeah, when you experience the benefits of medical cannabis, you want to help others. I think that's just part of cannabis itself. Now, up to that point where the doctor suggested that you went to Calm, were you? I'm assuming using cannabis before then. Were you using it medicinally before reaching out to the doctor?
Definitely. I think I certainly started using cannabis recreationally, but I think that I, over several years, started to notice when I was choosing to use cannabis was in times of mental stress, in times of pain. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which sort of explained a lot of my generalized issues. And I found that when I was using cannabis, it was definitely tied into many of those symptoms. So when I found a doctor who was open to discussing cannabis use as a medical sort of thing, she was aware of the medical program, but at that time, the MMAR was written in a way that it was for patients that were terminally or chronically ill in ways that were unaffected by traditional medication.
When was this again? Give me a year
this
again.
is 2005.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the medical program, the MMAR, began in 2001 in Canada. And that was the first federally licensable program, which allowed patients to purchase cannabis from one singular provider known as Prairie Plant System. And they sent out a...
It was grown in a mine shaft.
Yes, in an abandoned mine in Saskatchewan. They retrofit the area and put in lights, and they were growing cannabis that had been taken off of the illicit market. They'd used seeds that had been confiscated by the ERCMP and just grew it and was like, this is what you get. It's medical now, simply because we say so.
All named the same, cannabis sativa L.
Yeah, and they would mill it with its stems to guarantee a certain THC level, so that if they produced it and it tested too high, they would simply grind in part of the stem material to lower the THC content, because they had determined that that's what everybody needs. That's what medical cannabis is. Take it or leave it.
Wow.
So it wasn't a great program when it started, but it was one of the first in the world to allow patients to access cannabis at all on a legal sense.
I ordered some of that mine shaft swag when I first got my license, and I went looking for buds. I opened the package and went looking for buds. There wasn't any. It was all pre-ground. And I think
I guess that's because of the THC level. That's what Jennifer's saying. To reduce the THC, they had to put in some fluff, I guess you call it.
Did you get a nice buzz from it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Jen, I love the name, Living Medicine. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. As far as the mine shaft, I've had a number of my friends and colleagues and cohorts and stuff in Hawaii, where I once lived for 4 years. They've been growing pot in those volcano. The volcano goes off and the lava comes down, and you get what they call a lava tube.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've been growing pot in those things out there for 30 years. I don't know if the cops had to know, but they never busted them. So, but the mine does offer, or a tube like that offers a constant temperature, and usually those places have a free airflow. So it's actually, and of course it's protected from insects, people. So it's a pretty good location. Good for them.
Yeah, I think if it had been grown with love, then the cannabis might have been worth smoking. But I think that at the time, the people who were running it were running it simply because somebody had to do it. They were hiring horticulturalists from the agricultural sector, people who specialized in things like lettuce and kale and carrot to grow the cannabis. Because, well, plant, here's plants. So there was no care put towards the plants. There was no love. The seeds that were available for patients, because that was the other. Once the program expanded a little bit, they allowed patients to grow their own cannabis, but insisted that you use the seeds purchased from Health Canada. Now, I know myself and many other patients did diligently purchase those seeds.
I did.
And then we grew real cannabis because what those seeds produced did not help. And as we know, as individuals, what works for you and your condition and your symptoms doesn't necessarily work for me and mine, or even just one part of the day to another part of the day. You can't say that one strain is going to combat all of the different things that you need, or be an enjoyable thing for different parts of the day. So we kept running into issues with the medical program like that, until finally, with enough advocacy from patients like myself and like Al, Robert Neron, Michelle Rainey, Allison Murden, it was all these wonderful people that have gone out to the courts and fought and said, no, this isn't good enough. Just because you've let us have this, it's not enough. It's not good enough. We need more. And so thankfully the program expanded again, and patients were allowed to grow their own. We were allowed to trade with other patients in order to garner new genetics and create profiles that were working for individuals. Patients like Liam McKnight, who is now he's almost 14, I think now. But when the medical program was at risk, Liam's story, he was 5 years old. And according to the medical process, which he had been signed up for, gone through all of the steps, leapt through the hoops with his parents and his doctors, legally the only way for him to consume cannabis at the time was to smoke it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
And we're all like, well, that's not, he's a 5-year-old. That's not going to help. He needs cannabis. Is a severe seizure disorder. And so with his help, his family's help, we were able to take it to the Supreme Court and allow edibles to be made legal for patients. But that wasn't until 2015.
That's again lack of legal knowledge. I've said this before, but a wonderful doctor, a nurse, PhD type doctor, Melanie Dreyer, got a federal grant years ago in the 60s. I think she was down in Jamaica, and she studied infants to 12 years old, thousands of them, for the federal government. And what she was studying was the use of cannabis for infants. And how that worked out is in Jamaica, there are a lot of Coptic people, Rastafarian religion, and cannabis is very much part of their religion in various ways. The Rastafarian mothers that would have these infants be born, the first thing they would give these infants before even mother's milk would be a weakened but very viable cannabis tea. The babies would be given this. And those women in that language of Jamaica are called Roots daughters. Not that that matters, but if you look it up, it's Roots daughters. And that'll point you to this. But my point is just to be supportive of Jennifer and what they had to do in a court of law. It was unnecessary. All they had to do is read the reports from Melanie Dreyer over 10 years. And by the way, they were all positive. The kids that were given the cannabis were fine, I had a testimony given at one of my patients out of time conferences early on, just about the time you got going. A fellow that was given cannabis at 2 years old, and worked for him. We also had a panel once called Mama Knows Best, and we had both mothers and grandmothers of kids that had some sort of emotional problem. And the thing that struck me the most was a mother and her child. The child had something going on, boy, and it just, the kid, ADHD on steroids or something. Anyway, they lived in California. They went out to visit Valerie Corral. I don't know if that name means, but Valerie and her husband started a dispensary, grow your own type and cannabis thing. Very famous. They got raided, et cetera, et cetera. But
Wham? Was it Wham? Wham? Woman's
yeah,
line.
Whoa man, Whoa man,
woman,
exactly. And anyway, they visited Valerie. Valerie gave the kid a cookie, a cannabis cookie, and they left. And what the mother said on the stage just stunned me. She said, so about halfway home, driving, her and her little boy, the kid said to him, "Mom, the noise in my head stopped."
Yeah.
Wow. So please go on, but I'm just trying to indicate that this is not some unique, novel, and dangerous practice.
Yeah, no, and I know that a lot of people have heard of Charlotte, Charlotte's Web, and that whole story, and it's sort of like Canada had our own version in Liam, and
others.
You, as a parent, you do anything for your child. When you see your child hurting, when you see your child in need, you would do anything for that child. And sometimes that goes against what society has determined is appropriate or not. And we are so blessed to have strong and incredible parents like Mandy that were willing to step forward and say, no, this is a thing, this is needed. And if we don't bring it to light, then hundreds, if not thousands of other children are going to go without. And in worst cases, be taken away from their parents because their parents are trying to provide their children with some relief. So working within the medical community has been something that's been a passion of mine since, like I said, since I started in 2005 with Calm.
Where'd you go from there? Where'd you go from Calm? You were a volunteer at Calm. You moved on.
Yeah, so I volunteered at Calm. Eventually I moved on to work at one of the many Vapor Central, which is one of the many vapor lounges in the city. So that's where I started doing more of my hosting events. We had comedy shows there. It was a little bit of an educational experience as well for me because it was more of a one-on-one with people who didn't necessarily know very much about cannabis, knew that they enjoyed it recreationally, but didn't know what options there were out there. So explaining to people about vaporizing as a benefit over smoking, explaining to them that there were edibles. And at the time, there was THC, Toronto Hemp Company next door. There was Kindred Cafe, which was a place that you could go and get cannabis edibles in a social setting. There was Clandestiny, which was another place downtown where you could get some edibles as just a normal person. And these weren't technically dispensaries at the time, but this is like 2007, 2008, where, if you know, you ask for the special brownies alongside the, mums that are grabbing chai lattes with their little baby bumpers. And Dom Kramer was one of the incredible businessmen who was willing to put himself out there and have these businesses. So I was blessed to work for him after working for Neve with Calm, which were two of really the biggest Toronto-based business owners in the early 2000s in cannabis. And I was gracious enough to be able to work for both and learn a lot about why cannabis businesses need to be run the way that they need to be run and how they need to be run to keep not only the owners safe, but also the patrons and the staff, because it has been a major issue in Canada, even through legalization, but more so beforehand, where that gray area has left a lot of people sort of in the lurch and not understanding what their rights are, and how they can go about securing those rights after raids and things like that. Because of course, many people came to the cannabis community through police intervention. So personal growers that had been growing for themselves to support their own medical needs get raided. Suddenly they hear that there is a legal system, there is a community out there for them. And so a lot of those people came to us and said sort of like, so what do I do now? How do I keep myself safe in the future? And so we really turned into a sort of hub of information, education, all of the different people from across the country. And as I think we were talking about earlier, Al and I, about the incredible expos that Canada had in the early to mid 2010s, where before legalization, we were actually able to have these incredible conferences from down in Metro Convention Center, even with people from Germany, from Japan, from South America, all coming together to Canada to learn about our medical system and how we were able and how we were trying to create more of a recreational market situation for all people out of what we'd already been able to build.
Listen, I gotta, thank you. You obviously stepped in at the right time. Those conferences was Marco Renda, one of the guys that was,
yeah.
What a great guy.
Self Magazine and Marco Renda, really incredible activist as well.
Yeah, okay. Why did you have to do this? It sounds, you were saying that people didn't even know there was a medical program in Canada. I mean, didn't the Canadian government say anything? What about the media? Nobody?
No, it was very quiet. It was, if you know, you know, and many doctors, even when approached about it by patients, would say, I don't know enough about it. I won't prescribe cannabis because I don't, as a doctor, have the information in order to prescribe it. And so...
Well, I could support that. I mean, if the guy doesn't know, I understand.
When I asked my specialist about using cannabis, and this was back in 2006, and I asked him about it, he told me 3 benefits right off the bat. But I don't know enough about the program, so let's try conventional medicines first.
Wow.
Well, let me tell you another story about Canada. I was searching around to have my second conference, and the university was the University of British Columbia, stood right up and said, "Wow, yeah, we could do that." I was not really happy that I had to go to Canada. But at that point in time, I couldn't find anybody in the United States that would sponsor me, even though we had done the first one in Iowa, in the University of Iowa, and it was accredited and all that. There's still not enough people in America with the balls back then to even host a friggin' conference. It was crazy. Anyway, I'm up in British Columbia, and it didn't happen. It ended up going to Portland, Oregon, and everything was fine. But I had talked to, there were 3 doctors up there on the staff of University Hospital up there who I was in liaison with. And finally I had to get to them and say, I'm sorry, you just didn't work out with you guys. I'm moving back to the United States. They said, okay. And we hung up the phone. Well, then I got an email, obviously by mistake. The female doc had hit reply to all, and I don't think she meant that. I would be in the all. and it said something like, I'm quoting, but it said something like, well, it's too bad that conference is not going to happen, but we don't need those Yanks. We can do it ourselves. I don't think you've had a conference like that in Canada to this day, but and so when you talk about your doctors and nurses not knowing about it, well, if they're not taught, how the hell are they going to know?
Well, they're not. They're not.
Yeah.
It's not taught in the medical end of things. I recently talked to a nurse. There was one very short little bit involved in their course on cannabis, but as reported recently, they're not taught even the endocannabinoid system. No, Jennifer, we're going to jump a little ahead a little bit than what I was planning on, but you were involved at Seneca College with dealing with like cannabis education.
Yeah, so Seneca College is a Toronto post-secondary education college. They tend towards more practical, hands-on type of things, but they also have a fairly good reputation as being an innovator in new industries. And one of the things that they were interested in was setting up some sort of cannabis education system after legalization. So in 2019, they started a cannabis information diploma program, you could say. And they planned on making 8 different courses, which would be Introduction to Cannabis, the growing of cannabis, a medical cannabis course for non-medical professionals, in addition to a medical professionals course. Now, that never really sort of came to life when they originally started it because COVID happened, so all new programs got shut down. But in 2021, they approached me to write their cannabis growing seminar, their introduction to cultivation, is what they wanted to call it. And I said, great, let's go. So I wrote up a whole, perspective as what the course would be. And I brought it to their team and they said, okay, well, it looks great, but none of us know anything about cannabis. So who can you get to vet this information for your course?
Oh.
I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, who do you want to vet it? And they said, oh, well, an education professional. And I said, well, do you know any that know anything about cannabis? They said, no, then we would have called them. Okay. So you hire me to write a course, and then you tell me you don't know if I'm qualified to have written the course for you. Okay. So they sent it off to a couple of other colleges that were building educational platforms, and they came back and said, yes, okay, this is good. We can do this. Let's go. So I went about starting to teach the course. And after my very first class, one of my students stayed behind and said to me, and this was all on via the internet, this is all a Zoom course. And one of my students came to me afterwards and said, so we've been talking about how much bud a plant can make. What does a bud look like?
Oh.
And this was someone who is paying a post-secondary course education to learn about cannabis because, well, they've never had access to anything before and they didn't know where to go, what to do, how to learn about it. So they were literally taking this course because they thought, well, this will introduce me to cannabis.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I had to take a step back and go, okay, so my course needs to be a lot more simplified. I love Casper's show. Yet this is what a bud looks like. Exactly, right? You can go on YouTube to see what bud looks like.
See that, Casper? See? There you go.
There you go. That's exactly it. Those are buds. And just the idea that there was such a lack of accessible information and information that people felt was worthy. Because I know a lot of people in my mother's generation, when the internet came about, well, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. So they don't feel comfortable. A lot of people who are a little older don't feel comfortable learning online because they don't know if their source is a good source or a bad source. And most of the information that has been available from the government has been about how to be safe, like how to not overdo it with cannabis, how to avoid the problems with cannabis. And what that leads to in a lot of people is anxiety about using cannabis. And so then that anxiety buildup is already there. And now the first time you use cannabis, you end up feeling anxious and unsure and unsafe. And that's what our education system has been doing to people now.
I can understand that. I didn't realize until about 2019, 2020 that the internet was for something other than porn. But so what was it that made you decide to become a public spokesperson? Because, that means you're painting a target on yourself and you're becoming a bullseye. And it can also affect your path that you're walking because people might not want to hire somebody who's a marijuana user. So what made you decide to wake up and start speaking publicly and become a target for this movement?
Well, I grew up in the theater. I was a singer and a dancer in my youth. And so I was very comfortable being sort of put in front of an audience from my childhood. And I've always been a very self-secured and person who likes to speak her mind. So the first time somebody handed me a bullhorn and said, "What do you think about this?" I have a lot to say about all of this. And it just sort of happened organically. As an actor and a performer, I like to dress up and be a little extra, as people like to say nowadays. So at events, I tended to show up in full pot leaf regalia, glitter wings, big bright green pot leaves sticking out of my hair, things like that. And as a result, I got approached by the news many times to give interviews and things like that. And then once you've done that once or twice, people start calling and saying, "Well, you're that girl we saw talk about cannabis." And because I've been in the medical community for so long, many of our other activists, like Al, I think I've known Al since 2012, probably.
Yeah, I'm thinking we probably met along the Global Marijuana March when because as you mentioned, you like to get dressed up in costumes and stuff like that. And yeah, Jennifer wore wings. Her last name is, it's got Pixie. You talked about pixie dust, Casper, right? So there you go.
Right.
Got the costume to go with the pixie dust.
Yeah. Just sprinkle a little bit of joy everywhere you go, and it'll come back to you tenfold.
Yes.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Look, can I get in this here on education?
Yeah.
I appreciate the street theater. And I think it always is good to bring attention to something and make it fun and not be threatening. And you obviously carried that out pretty well. But I'm back where I was. You sound to be like the United States of America about 15 years ago, as far as the educational level of your professional healthcare providers. And as Al said, not only about therapeutic cannabis, but the endocannabinoid system as a basic. So my question, is there any activity, and I do this for a reason, is there any activity in Canada with your registered nurses of a province of the country that is supporting medical cannabis in any real way?
I would say no.
Wow. I didn't want you to say that.
No.
Let me search for that.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where you will see individuals who are registered nurses and doctors and things like that who are active proponents of the plant and of medical use and all of that. As far as it goes for their regulatory bodies, they've been very wary of formally acknowledging the benefits of cannabis use. I think because they don't want people to come back at them and say, "Well, I used cannabis and then I didn't like it, or something bad happened, and where is your proof?" Because there aren't enough officially registered or recognized documents that quote unquote prove the efficacy of cannabis as medicine. They simply don't acknowledge them. There are lots of studies.
Well, yeah, McGill University, Mark Ware's been doing studies up there for them for 30 years. And that's Canadian studies, let alone the rest of the world. Unfortunately, well over 120,000 pages of peer-reviewed study on the safety and the efficacy of cannabis. Yeah. But you're not. I'm also asking about the endocannabinoid system. If they're going to ignore cannabis as therapeutic value, okay, they're dumb as stones, but I can't stop it. But what about the endocannabinoid system? I mean, that system, for you that might not be knowing, that system of your body exists in everything alive on Earth. Elephants, eagles, snakes, fish, us, your dog, your cat, they all got an endocannabinoid system. So I don't know how the hell you become any kind of medical professional if you don't know what that is.
Well, when I was dealing with Seneca College, one of the courses that they already had established was the Cannabis for Medical Professionals course. Now, again, this was just a diploma additional program that you could choose to take. This was not mandated at all. But when I spoke to the teacher, the instructor of that course, he was unaware of the TPVR1 receptor and how that was affected by cannabis. He was unaware of the cannabis hyperemesis syndrome and how that can be dealt with and how that affects people and why that affects people. He was unaware of the counterindications using cannabis with things like NSAIDs and other medications that can be, counterindicated, specifically because of the mixture in the endocannabinoid system. And that he was the one teaching the medical cannabis course, and he himself was unaware that these topics would be things that should be covered. And when I pushed him, the main focus of the course was on how to determine the prescription dosage and nothing else.
That's that's what you're in 21 now when you're talking the conversation.
Yeah, 2021.
The endocannabinoid system was discovered by Ann Howlett, a MD researcher at the University of Indiana down here in the United States in 1988.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not being taught. That's the thing.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was due to the leaked information from Pfizer when they determined that cannabis was not. They determined that cannabis was not viable for medical research for them to produce drugs. She got their initial research in order to take hers to be able to figure out the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah. Well, it's very disappointing that you're dealing with over 30 years of medical. I'm amazed because the Canadian veterans receive cannabis used to be therapeutic. They get it from the government for nothing. They get it delivered to their home, all of which I endorse to the max. But you would think now, having had that program in effect for, I don't know what, guys, a decade, 8 years, anyway, a while, that the data alone collected there would show the government of Canada that this has very little downside and a hell of a lot of up. But essentially, they're not even paying to their own data, obviously.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with this whole thing about cannabis. I've been doing this 40 years, and I've never understood this whole thing. I've never understood what I'm doing. I mean, I know what I'm doing, but I don't know why I'm doing it. It is just so obvious. We're talking medical here, sure, but then we could go to building houses out of this stuff and making paper and not cutting down trees. I mean, anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jennifer, but I am appalled at the lack of education up there. It's terrible down here, but hell, we make you guys look really bad.
There's an article out in a cannabis news website, and within that article, it said that 71.7% of the nurses and 79.5% of the students had never heard of the endocannabinoid system.
Ooh. See, now down here in the United States, let me give a boost to the ANA, American Nurses Association. Twice in the last 15 years or more now, they have issued a white paper to all nurses in the United States, registered nurses. There's like 3 million of them and a bunch of people. And they've said, you must, if you're going to be an RN and you're going to practice in the United States, you must know everything you can know about the therapeutic cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. It's required. They put that out twice.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, well, down here, if you read my book, guys, one of the ways that you'll see that this all happened was not because of Al Byrne, but because of nurses. Yeah. It was the nursing community of the United States that said, this is medicine. We know it. We see it. We're number one jobs, take care of patients, and we need this stuff for our patients. And they never let up. And that's why I asked that question about the Canadian nurses, because their sisterhood here and a lot of their sister organizations in Europe, especially South America, Central America, have endorsed cannabis from the get-go. So they're way behind.
I will make sure to check with this person who just did the nurse program within the last 2 years and is going on to the next nurses program to find out what all they did learn about endocannabinoid system. But I know on the cannabis end, it was just a very short little segment of their course. Now, in my introduction to of you, Jennifer, I mentioned that you've been involved in starting or being involved in some cannabis companies. There was the Toronto Growth Industries, Earl Dab Labs, the Care Center. I see there under your name, you say Pixies Collective. What's that all about?
So the Pixies Collective is my new venture. It is designed to help adults that are in the cannabis world, whether they be professionals or just recreational users or new introduction to cannabis, a place to find the community. So far we've held 3 markets. Did one for 420 that was huge. And we're going to continue doing markets and other social gatherings that allow adults to come together to find the options that are still available out there for cannabis, to meet the people, the producers, learn from the people who are making the baked goods and how it's done, why it's done, finding out that there is a community, a vibrant one still in the city. One of the things that we've talked about is how great our conferences used to be in 2012, 2013. I think in 2016, there were over 150 dispensaries in the city of Toronto. And now...
Big smoke.
Yeah, it was the big smoke, and it was beautiful. And now, we've had a huge influx with the regulated market. There was a lot of regulated dispensaries that opened up in the city, and a lot of them have closed. And a lot of the places that do exist don't feel like the old school, the community places where you could see, smell, touch, experience the cannabis, talk to someone who's used the cannabis before, talk to someone who knows the products. Now we have conferences in Canada that focus on the regulated companies handing out free samples to the dispensary workers to say, here, smoke this so that you can tell people to buy it. Here, this is how we do this. Make sure that you sell this to other people. And the number one thing is a lot of these conferences aren't even open to the general public. They're only available to people who have what we call the CanCell, which is the Ontario licensing for dispensary workers. So it goes through a short, I think it's about a 2-hour slideshow with questionnaire, and it determines you know enough about cannabis to sell it to other people. And a lot of that is more about the regulations, like what time is your store allowed to be open? If someone comes in and they appear to be intoxicated, are you allowed to serve them cannabis? That's more of what the regulations in the CanCell are about, as opposed to, this is what cannabis is. This is a sativa bud. This is an indica bud. These are the different effects that they have on people. So unfortunately, even the education that is going out to dispensary workers isn't focused towards the experience of the user.
Are you having trouble with edibles up there? People overdoing it?
No, not really, because the regulated market has limited the percentage of THC that you're allowed to have in edibles. So most edibles that are on the regulated market are a 10 milligram per piece or per dose or per package. So I don't know what that would do for you. Not much for me.
An issue. There was some issues early on of the young ones, the kids, getting hold of some cannabis edibles.
Well, we've had that too, Al. But what we have down here as a problem is, folks, if you don't know, you eat an edible and nothing might happen for 45 minutes or something. It's not like when you hit a joint and you get almost instantaneous result. Your body just starts reacting. You eat it. And what happens here is they pop one of these edibles. They wait 20 minutes or 30 minutes and they go, well, shit, that didn't happen. They take another one.
Or even 10 minutes.
They take too many too quick. They don't understand the time frame here. And what happens is pretty soon they've had 4 of them in an hour. And what we have down here is then they turn themselves into the ER. So then the rap is that you take cannabis, you end up in the ER. So that instead of it's a dose problem, okay, but they don't. So you haven't got there yet, but you probably will.
Well,
Al Graham, Al Byrne, I need to interrupt just a minute. I'm guilty of just that in Portland, Oregon, because I thought, well, I know all about cannabis. You can't, and I did. I ate one, and I just kind of after about an hour, I felt So I ate a couple of more, and then I went to sleep, and then I woke up, and I thought I was having a heart attack, a stroke, or something. And I did. I went to the ER, and the very first thing in Oregon, the nurse asked me, have you had any cannabis edibles? So it was like, well, she said, a lot of senior citizens. It's like, excuse me, senior citizens. So I did. I'm a fool who went to the ER because I didn't pay attention to what my friends told me, and now your government is using your visit against you.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I think that's why these personal connections are so important for people to make. Pixie's Collective is there so that you can meet the producer, so that you can talk to the person who made the edibles, and it's a lot easier when you're talking to the vendor themselves and saying like, look, trust me, don't eat more than this. I find, I found we have yet to have a problem at one of our events where someone has truly overdone it. A couple of people have fallen asleep, and then you wake them up and then they're okay. They're just fine. Get them some water. We always have orange juice and things like that on hand. Things like vitamin C help regulate your system a little bit when you've overdone it. So being in a space that not only is comfortable and safe for new users, but also is staffed with people who have experience dealing with overdoing it, new users, anxieties, people who are more used to being around service animals or people who have different needs. It can be very hard for people with disabilities to go out and experience social gatherings because they don't know, is there going to be space for my wheelchair? Is there going to be space for my dog? Is somebody going to accuse me of, not needing to be here because I'm not as disabled as I look? Or, there's so much that goes into that experience being a disabled person, that making a safe space for us is important to me, and trying to create these events where everyone can feel welcome, everyone can feel protected and safe and included is something that's it's a huge issue for me that I want to make not an issue for anyone else.
Yeah. Is there any difference up there in Canada? This is a U.S. guy that just asking a dumb question. Okay. Is there any difference in the approach to cannabis in Canada between the English speaking Canadians and the French speaking?
Well, law-wise there is, but go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I can't speak for the French community as far as it goes for their feelings about it. But certainly the laws in Quebec have been much harsher towards public use. You're not allowed to smoke in public streets. You're not allowed to grow your own in Quebec. I think that it's their regulation market has been much tighter because of some of the history that is in Quebec in regards to gangs and what has been a major controlling influence on the cannabis industry in Quebec.
Yeah, I think their stores are provincially run stores, they're not privately run, as well as their age, I think 21.
You're right. They did. They raised their age to 21, and it's 19. I think everywhere else in the country.
And get this, everybody, they even have as far as I know, it's still in place. You can't sell a shirt with a cannabis leaf on it.
Yeah, that's still a law in Quebec.
You can't sell a shirt that's got a picture, a drawing, a piece of art, a piece of freaking art on it. What?
Yeah, all of their bongs still say for tobacco use only.
No wonder some of these Canadians want to be our 51st state, man. They get their free speech back.
I hope you know that when that happens, Jennifer, you're going to have to learn how to speak English.
Yeah.
Canadian,
I
right?
love the way these guys say anything that's O-U-T, though. Out, about. I keep trying to do that myself. I can't pull it off.
And when you become our
Pronounce
51st
words
state,
right.
when
Yeah.
you become our 51st state, your laws don't improve automatically.
Well, once you guys learn how to spell neighbor and stuff like that, you know.
Uh,
Yeah.
So do you foresee any time soon where you retire from being a cannabis activist, Jennifer?
oh gosh, I don't have any plans to. If all of a sudden they fixed everything that I see as a problem with the world, then I would have to retire. So I'd love to, but I think that there will always be a space outside of the regulated market in Canada, because that's where Pixie's Collective is operating right now is technically outside of the regulated market. We are partnering with as many brands as we can, which include independent operators, indigenous folks, regulated market companies when they're able to and available. We really want to connect all the avenues, all of the aspects of the cannabis industry. It's hard. There's a lot of animosity between the regulated market that consider themselves the legal market, and then the unregulated, the indigenous, and the independent producers, like people like myself. I have the original MMAR certification as a producer, so I'm a licensed producer for myself. And that was kept in place through the Allard injunction, which is a Supreme Court case that we won, and it allows me to produce and share and sell my medicine to other medical patients that have a need. So what I'm doing by sharing my medicine with other patients is not illegal. However, it's not recognized by a lot of the industry leaders that consider that to be the gray market still. But there's still so much of a need for that, because there's so many patients whose very specific strain needs aren't being met by the regulated products. Even people like Liam, who we talked about earlier, Bedrocan had been his supplier for, I think, 6 or 7 years. They had an oil that was very effective for his condition. Unfortunately, they determined in 2019 that it was no longer a viable financial decision to continue making that product. And so they stopped.
They don't know how to sell. They don't know how to sell.
And-
I got a question for. How did you become a licensed producer? I mean, did you have to pay a lot of money, take classes, go down
No,
and promise the government that you never sell it to anybody other than? How do you become a licensed seller? I mean, you just I got pot first.
Nowadays, it's a lot different. What happened in my case was that the laws in 2010, they wanted to change how their the federal medical policies were done, and they decided that they would change the entire program, and that patients would no longer be allowed to grow for themselves. And we said that's unacceptable, and here's all the reasons why. And we took it to the Supreme Court with a person named Neil Allard as the forerunner, and we won that case, stating that our rights to grow our own medical cannabis were grandfathered in, despite the changes that the new program was making. So the way that they worded that decision was that we were licensed producers, and then when they changed the laws in 2018, they used the phrase the only entities that are allowed to legally sell cannabis are licensed producers. Here I am, a licensed producer.
We all receive, when you apply, you receive a license to produce cannabis. And within when the court changes, there was section 4 or 5 was removed, and it had something to do about, and allowed us to be able to supply other patients with cannabis.
So
we are producers. Okay. Like when you think producer, people are thinking companies.
Right.
Normally, right? But
right.
Individually, we are a licensed producer. We have a license, and we are allowed to produce cannabis.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's not outside of the law. It's very much strictly within the words of the law that allow us to do this. But it's not recognized by some of the larger entities, the Tweeds and the Bedrocans and the Mendos of our world. They see that as a threat because they did have to go through an expensive licensing process. They had to get inspections. They had to pay for licensing. They have to maintain certain, I think, minimums with their suppliers. Like, for example, the OCF is one of the largest, or is the largest single buyer of cannabis in the world. And their minimums are so high that independents and craft companies almost don't have a chance to get their product on that market. So in Ontario, it's very difficult for small producers to actually get their product out to the consumer.
Yeah, we're having the same problem down here. But let me go back to your court case, may I?
Yeah.
Yeah, you made a great statement. I want to know how you did it. You said you convinced the Supreme Court of Canada that people should be able to grow their own because, finish the sentence, please.
Because the unique needs of each individual patient are best met with their own supply. So many patients had spent years going through seeds, creating genetics and breeding their own genetics to create strains that truly met their individual needs, whether it be someone with MS or someone with diabetes or someone with mental health issues. The nuances of your condition and the specific options of strains that were available back in the day were very limited. So many patients chose to grow for themselves. Additionally, there was a designated growing program for a short while in which people were able to grow for medical patients. So many former underground growers sort of came out of the woodwork and said, hey, I can grow really good cannabis. I'd like to provide you with really good cannabis that will work for you. And so now these patients have access to a high quality, high terpenes and positive effects for their conditions. And then you say to them, well, you can't have that anymore. Well, cannabis in a very general sense doesn't work for everybody, but this cannabis works for me. That cannabis works for him. So to say that we both can't have what we need is just telling us that our needs aren't worth being met.
So you made it personal and patient orientated. It seems
Absolutely.
like that was your argument.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was over the fact when the MMPR came in place and they removed the patient's rights to grow their own cannabis. Under the MMAR program, which was the original one, patients could grow. We had a change of government, and they decided that they wanted to bring in corporate cannabis.
Oh, yeah.
They started that, and then they told the patients that they couldn't grow anymore, and they removed our rights and told us to put our cannabis in kitty litter and put it out to the curb.
So I was interested in the answer. Of course, I agree with it because I think that's what we did here in the United States years ago with Patients At a Time. We brought the patients up and said, listen to these people.
Yeah.
And that broke the ice. It really did. So apparently that was a very effective argument with your court. Was the decision pretty unanimous? I don't know even how many you've got on that court. But.
I'm not sure how. Go ahead.
I know that it was Judge Phelan that was the determining voice on the final paperwork, and
you only needed one guy. Okay, all right.
Yeah. So he determined that if the government of Canada wanted to take it further, they could. However, it wasn't necessarily worth their while. I think there was something like 15 to 20,000 individuals who met the qualifications of the court case as it was finalized. And so what the government basically said was, okay, as long as you keep absolutely everything the same, you people can do it. Everybody else is out of luck. Nobody else can do this from now on. Just you guys.
Okay, well, that's bad part. But the good part is they recognize patients and the different needs of patients and the fact that cannabis is a very different plant depending
Yeah.
on its genetics, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That's interesting. I asked that question to be informed because I live in Florida, and next year we will have a discussion or a vote on grow your own here in Florida. We do have medical, we have recreational. So it's a matter of grow your own. And your argument is very persuasive, and I'm going to talk to my Florida cohorts and see if we can't push that a little bit. Thank you.
Now back to the your collectives, Jennifer. Before we wrap things up, the how often do you have them? And I'm assuming the location is always TBA, but how often do you have them? And how?
What's TVA? Come on, talk American here.
Yeah,
So,
we don't have translators.
So one of the ways
Talking about-
that we keep our events safe is that we don't release the specific address of our events until the day before. One of the things that has been a problem in the city of Toronto has been the bylaw officers, as opposed to the police. The bylaw officers come into venues that have hosted cannabis events, and they say, if you continue to host these types of events, we'll start revoking your liquor license. We'll revoke your building permit if you want to make renovations.
Wait a minute. Time out. United States citizen. What is this? What is it? A bi what? What are they? Is that some sort of male, female thing? Or what is that?
So cities in Canada, municipalities have their own series of laws. We have the federal laws, we have the provincial laws, and then we have the municipal laws. And most of those are enforced by not police officers, but a secondary form of law enforcement that are known as bylaw officers. So they're the ones that will give you a ticket for not wearing a helmet if you're a bicycle, or like riding a bicycle in traffic. They will. They're the ones that restaurants, if they have their safe food handling, things like that. They check businesses to make sure businesses have licenses to operate in the city. They check taxis. They do those sorts of things. Most of what they do is to fine the public.
They're the local busybodies, then, basically.
Yeah, it's about gaining fine money for the city of Toronto because you're doing something the city of Toronto doesn't necessarily like.
Okay. All right.
So we've had, and not just us, but many of the events that get held in the city. There's a few locations that are sort of brick and mortar shops that still appreciate making these types of events happen, and they have been approached by bylaw officers threatening their landlords with tickets and fines and things. So as a result, we don't release our exact locations until the day beforehand. We host about 10 markets a year. Our next dates are June the 1st and July the 6th. July 6th is going to be really big because it's just ramping up towards 7/10, which is the new 420 for anyone who doesn't know, the dab holiday of the year. So we're going to have a big event.
What is 7/10? Why is that significant? I don't understand. I don't get it.
So 7/10, when you flip it upside down, it reads oil. Like 710 becomes OIL. And so that's like the when dabs and concentrate use became more of a popular thing. Someone out there decided that the dab people needed their own special day along with 420. And so 7/10 was born. And now there's people who some say it should be July 10th and some people who say it should be October 7th. Here in Canada, we celebrate it in July because it's warmer out. And in October, it's bloody miserable to have a party outside.
So I get it. Kind of like Bob. When you turn it upside down, it spells Bob.
There, yes, the calculator.
It's the calculator, oil.
October, yeah, that's when all the Canadians show up down here in Florida. Is October. They're getting out of Dodge.
No one wants to be up here anymore. So
yeah, they say that. They come over.
It's cold.
So we're definitely hoping that we'll have them in. We'll have something in August, something in September. I'm sure we'll have a Christmas market as well. But you can follow us on Instagram to find out all the details. We are at Pixie's Collective, and we drop all the info through Instagram and our Facebook as well. And we're working towards having more advertising out there, be it through episodes like this, through various podcasts, and just trying to get the word out there in all the different forms of media for people to know that there is a community out there, and we love you guys. We love everyone, and we want everyone to come out and enjoy the community, enjoy the diversity that our community has, because that's one of the other great things about cannabis. It's not just one type of person who uses cannabis. It is every type of person. We've had our 420 event actually made it to the news, and by the end of the day, we were having people who were coming there who barely spoke English, but they were like, "We heard cannabis was here. Let's go cannabis. We're here in Canada. Let's go cannabis."
Yeah,
we were like, that's what it's all about.
I think so.
Well, we certainly enjoyed having you here today.
Thank
There
you.
was, other than not understanding Canadian a couple of times, it was really informative. But my personal thanks. And if I can help you somehow with the educational side of what you're trying to do, give me a call.
Well, your book would be absolutely amazing resource for places like Seneca, because again, there's no textbooks. So when they asked me for a book list to give to my students, I said, well, I've got a huge list of useful books, but none of these are textbooks. And they said, okay, well then we'll just host a book night or something. And I was, all right. So that is one of the things that I did in my class, was I encouraged every student at the beginning of each class, every student was to bring in a book or to tell the class about a book or a pamphlet or something they read about cannabis. And the incredible diversity that we got through all of that was amazing as well. Everything from, Mummy's Funny Medicine to Coppert growth, bug, and pest management book. And just the ideas that sort of expanded from that. Oh, well, this book is about cannabis because it's about growing, or it's about using bugs, or this one's about living soil, or this is we had someone brought in The Emperor Wears No Clothes. Which is amazing. I was like, I haven't seen this book in years, And it was a great way of getting people engaged in how they can further their own learning. And I think a book like yours would be so important, especially for the medical community, to learn why it's so important that they learn about these different parts of cannabis therapeutic use.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
I remember when The Emperor Wears No Clothes was the only book on the market that talked about the history of cannabis, the medical value of cannabis, and the wonderful things that can be done with cannabis. And they tried to silence that book. They tried to silence the author of it, Jack Hare. But if anybody ever had a chance to meet Jack Hare, you knew he was someone who could not be silent.
No.
And we're all grateful for it.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. Yes, we
now,
are.
As we told everybody at the beginning of the show, I don't know, you guys got any more questions for Jennifer?
No, we're good to go here. We need this lady back, though.
Okay, we can arrange that. We can arrange that.
Yeah, we have more to do here with Canada. We do.
Over to you, Casper, when it comes to.
I want to, first of all, I want to say thank you, Jennifer, for being part of our big broadcast here and for bringing your knowledge and wisdom to our audience. There are a lot of people who are desperate to find information about cannabis and to be able to find other people who are utilizing it for medicinal purposes, so they are able to reach out to them to find help that they need. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for the work that you're doing up in Canada and being willing to share it with everybody around the world. We really have learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Al Graham, I want people to know how they can find your big broadcast and let them know some of the programming that they will find when they tune in.
PaceRadio.net is where you'll find our programming. As I mentioned earlier, 7 days a week. It's all available there. And it's all free for downloading or just watching. Right.
And Al Byrne, once again, let people know how they can find that valuable book that you were diligent enough to put together.
For country and cannabis, anywhere. Apple Books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Thrift Books. They sell books online. They'll have it. It's 360. It's history. It's a lot of education. It talks about all the things we talked about today. Everything. They're only in significantly more detail. And I hope what I have learned, I wrote it. It's a 40-year, coverage. It's a lot of space, and I wrote it from memory. And I pretty much got it right. I've been corrected about my a speech that the Cardinal of Boston made to my high school hockey team. Apparently, I was off by a year. But other than that, nobody yet has given me any grief about it all. So anyway, I think it's a good read. If you're in, well, certainly if you're a doctor and a nurse in Canada, or any kind of health department, PA, nurse practitioner, you need this friggin' book. It is just, wow. So anyway, again, to Jennifer, though, thanks again. It was great.
Thank you.
And I want to remind people how important it is to check out our archives. That's one of the reasons why we're still doing the big broadcast here on timeforhemp.news is where you find us. And our archive is full of all kinds of valuable information from doctors, lawyers, patients, and business entrepreneurs who have been working to bring information about how wonderful this plant is to the forefront and make it possible for people to have it. So please go to timeforhemp.news. Check out our archives. I also want to remind you that we got free music downloads there from our in-house group, The Illusions of Music, which, by the way, did the new version of the Time for Hemp theme song that you heard at the beginning of the show. And as a new segment to the Time for Hemp broadcast, when we close our show, we'll be closing our show with a full song, the full theme song of Time for Hemp, done by the Illusions of Music. And they're an amazing group with Bud Stoner, Anita Moore-High, Harry Johnson, and Mike Hunt. They all work together to raise the voice of the movement musically. So do make it a point to go and check it out. You get free downloads, lots of free music that will praise the tunes of cannabis. And so that's one thing that I want to make certain that we are here is entertaining, but we're also informative, because as Al Graham and Al Byrne and I have been dedicating ourselves, along with Jennifer Pixie, to educating the world about cannabis, it's because we all really do believe it is time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment.